Hello everybody, I'm Wren and I love passion projects. More accurately, I love projects injected with passion. Because we are talking about finished commercial projects here, not beloved hobby work made with no consideration of profit. Though I do love those too. Today, I'm talking about the type of projects that you look at and go, this piece posed a challenge that someone took personally. Or make you think someone saw an opportunity to do something they loved and did not hesitate. You know, the kinds of projects that someone kept turning over in the back of their minds like a rotisserie chicken until a grease drop set the rest of their brain on fire and they had to do something. More often than not, these projects exist in a space where the answer to, is it good on a technical level, and do you love it, have opposing answers. But that isn't to say there is no overlap. And because I rarely, if ever, pass up an opportunity to talk about my favorite Hope Punk series, I'm going to primarily be using RWBY, specifically Red, the original trailer and proof of concept for the show, to help illustrate my thoughts. You see, my big pitch for why passion projects hit different is that the makers care about the details. Inevitably, someone, or multiple someones, on the creative team love the ideas, themes, or aesthetics of the job and want to do their part to show off why the project is worth some love and attention. And this desire manifests in going above and beyond with the details. Sometimes it means Easter eggs. Other times it means the actors chew the hell out of the scenery. And sometimes it means the costuming department completely rewrites the book on making materials. In the case of long-running franchises, it can mean niche callbacks. And in the case of brand new media content, it can mean dropping breadcrumbs that the audience will be able to add meaning to later and get excited about. Which is where Red goes off the chain. And I can hear you, okay? You're saying, Wren, Red is a trailer. It's supposed to drop a bunch of breadcrumbs and plot threads. And you're not really wrong, but I want to direct your attention over to something Monty Ohm, the creator of RWBY, once said about Red.
The Red trailer is a little bit out of character because we didn't have a character. I didn't really investigate it as much. So it's really more, the Red trailer was a weapon resume.
Now, I have a lot I could say about how the growth of RWBY as a character in the show and the circumstances portrayed in Red contradict this statement, but that is a whole other deal and relates to the literary critique philosophy Death of the Author, which is its own future video topic. Instead, I want to focus on this idea of Red not being a trailer, but a weapons demonstration, or at least more broadly, as a proof of concept that was pulled together in an alarmingly short amount of time, as Ohm describes here.
I made in about 2 weeks the Red trailer, and it was actually almost twice as long. It was like 5 minutes of RWBY killing wolves, but we edited it down and we added the song. And I did that in about 2 weeks.
2 weeks.
It's about the passion, man.
Including editing. And we know from the RWBY production timeline, and because of certain details in Red itself, RWBY's signature inherited emblem, for one, that the video went largely unchanged from its role serving primarily as a weapons demonstration to its role as a trailer. To really emphasize how much care and passion went into creating Red, I have made a little chart that lists off a bunch of the underlying fundamentals to RWBY's story and world building. So here is our breadcrumb guide for the RWBY fundamentals. We're just gonna go through the trailer, stamping them as I get excited over each element. With each stamp, I'd like you to ask yourself, was this element strictly necessary to show off how cool the combat could be? However, before we get started, I do want to shout out the fact that not all of these fundamental ideas are fully developed in the trailer, simply hinted at. And not all of them were intended to be breadcrumbs. Some of them are just there for the rule of cool, such as Summer Rose's grave. If you were in certain corners of the fandom back in 2016, you may remember the pandemonium that occurred when Jeff Williams told the tale of how it became Summer's grave.
It was that line. Red like roses fills my dreams. Oh, right, and takes me to the place you rest. Which that was funny, too, because I was just like, well, all right, she's at a grave, so okay. I'm like, Monty, who's in the grave? He's like, I don't know. I'm like, and I'm like, no, really? He's like, I'm like, so what? He's like, I don't know, I just thought it would be cool if she visited the grave. I'm like, you're fucking with me. He's like, I'm like, what if it's her mom? He's like, that's cool. I was like, wow, all right, cool. So it's her mom. All right, cool. Why not?
But let's get to stamping this guide sheet, shall we? So right off the bat, we have the woman RWBY idolizes, and whose pedestal is the anchor around Ruby's neck. The Rule of Cool edition turned narrative haunter-in-chief, Summer Rose. Which, damn, I just realized there is a whole deep dive that could be done on RWBY and the concept of legacies, because that is what her grave expands out to be, but not today. Maybe in the future? Would anyone want to see that? Let me know. But for now, moving on. Color. I want partial credit despite the scorching hot take I am about to announce, because it is based in the artistic knowledge that shades are not technically colors. Deal? Okay, so to really emphasize the importance of color in this world, and perhaps also to flex his visual design skills, Ohm only uses 3 colors in this video. Red for Ruby, Crescent Rose, and Beowulf insides. Blue for the sky and snow shadows. And one really specific use of yellow around the moon to give our girl a massive halo as the action kicks off. All variations of the red and blue are simply a matter of shifting the values. Is this strictly true? Probably not, but I'm ignoring my eyedropper tool. You guys can figure it out if you're bothered. I choose to believe it's true in spirit. The point is, color is huge in RWBY, both for Doyleist reasons regarding rules of set and character design, and for Watsonian reasons regarding the in-universe lore that dictates naming conventions and fashion divides. Let's also stamp soundtrack now. Ohm knew Jeff Williams professionally, having worked in the same office briefly during the production for Red vs. Blue, and approached him relatively early on in the process of creating RWBY, and almost got rejected.
Why is she killing these dogs? What is this? Is a show about a psycho fucking kid slicing up dogs? What the fuck? I'm like, I don't know if I want to work on this, man. This is nasty.
Like, I was in that really dark, like, I was in that goth phase, so I was like, yes! Oh!
And I'm just like, no! Save the dogs! Anyway, so...
Thank goodness Jeff let Monty explain his vision, and extra thanks to the fact that Jeff's then teenage daughter, Casey Lee Williams, also saw the clip, because otherwise, RWBY would just not be what it is today without the iconic stylistic and vocal signatures of the Williams family. Anyway, let's stamp fairy tales. Young girl in a red hood walks a forested path with lurking lupine figures around, is almost globally renowned as Little Red Riding Hood, a nigh-on universal tale thanks to its age and the proliferation of Western media across the globe by the Hollywood industrial complex and its counterparts. Meanwhile, the soundtrack is throwing us Beauty and the Beast. Just like that, we are in a world that adheres closer to the logic of myth and legend than it does to our own. An especially tasty crumb from me and my story-loving self in particular. We continue through Monster-Filled Wilderness, which you better believe is a stamp too. No civilization in sight, but a whole pack of Beowulfs, which every time I say their name out loud, I am like, why are we talking about some old Geat king? Because those are Balverines. It's mostly just because they don't have the bone masks yet. Mostly. Anyway, Monster-Filled Wilderness is a common trope in video games, particularly JRPGs, which Ohm and later Luna and Shawcross drew a lot of inspiration from. It's very simply the idea that towns, villages, and camps are generally safe zones, while everywhere else is possible monster encounter territory. The show gives us a very in-depth look at what this kind of world building can do to a society in a way that games just don't. While we're here, and so I don't accidentally start calling these guys Balverines somewhere else in the video, let's stamp Grim. We just know that they are monsters here. We don't learn that they were probably drawn in by Ruby's grief for her mother, only to immediately regret it because there are few things that make young Ruby feel closer to her mother than slaughtering Grim en masse like a hero. But yeah, there are monsters in the woods and we are left to suppose that they must be normal because Ruby came armed. But let's not get ahead of ourselves because next up we have semblances. This little moment is prototype Petal Burst. It looks so different here, but even in this early state, Ruby can go Neum and confuse Grim, and really, what more do you need for a weapons demo trailer? This shows that the idea of individuals having special powers that made them unique in some way was an early development. Hey look, there's that fancy third color for the moon halo, and boom! Gun time. If you have somehow arrived here with no knowledge of Ruby, there is only one guiding principle you need to know to help with the first 3 volumes. Everything is also a gun. Unless you are a core cast member with a simple, mostly plain colored sword design, but really just assume everything is a gun until proven otherwise. Considering the concept and phrase got memed so hard back in the early days, it's a little funny to me that Red comes in gun first. For almost every other core cast member, it's like, that's a machete cleaver, those are bracelets, that's a sword and shield. And then the show goes, no, add gun. And then everything is 65% cooler. No, I will not cite sources because we are moving on, or rather backward, to another fundamental that was revealed with the gun: trope subversion. Or subversion in general, from tropes to archetypes to gender roles. Subversion is a huge part of what makes RWBY as compelling as it is. We all know that in the story of Little Red Riding Hood, she gets swallowed by the wolf. Yet immediately, this Little Red starts killing them in droves. And with such an outrageous weapon too. Because not only is Crescent Rose a gun, it is a high-caliber sniper scythe, which is one of the most only-in-fiction weapons to only-in-fiction weapon. Which, by the way, stamped. I cannot stress enough just how much Ohm was inspired by anime and JRPGs, where weapons like these are staples of multiple genres of anime and games. We all know scythes are comically ineffective weapons in real combat, okay? But what else is animation for, if not cool gun scythe? I always get blown away by the attention to detail put into how Ruby wields Crescent Rose in the first few moments of the fight. The way she basically throws herself around the weapon and lets the weapon pull her along until she has built up enough momentum with her shots to spin it around her instead. It's not always consistent. Sometimes she needs to do a different kind of cool thing, but damn if it isn't amazing when it's happening. Speaking of how she moves, let's stamp choreography. Dance Dance Revolution enthusiast that Monty Ohm publicly showed himself to be, as well as a skilled mocap artist, it's no surprise that the choreography is so tight. The timing and the flow are incredible, and there is no moment wasted trying to put Ruby into a classically cool aesthetic pose, just trusting the rhythm to make her look cool as hell. There is a fantastic breakdown of how Ohm uses perspective lines to achieve the cohesive look of this fight without the staple combat poses that I'm gonna drop a link to in the description because it just explains the concept with a depth of skill that I just do not have the words to convey. Before you go watching that, however, let us stamp our last stamp, which is dust. Just like with semblances, this reference is so deeply in its prototype stage that you could be forgiven for missing it. But even when we didn't know what it was, I am sure everyone who noticed the addition of the symbol to the new cartridge during the reload instinctively knew, or at least was primed by the soundtrack to realize, that shit was about to kick up another notch. And boy did it. With that, we are at the end to my little breadcrumb guide to the fundamentals. If you think I missed any, please speak up in the comments. Personally, I think that as a weapons demonstration, it needed the weapon, of course, a model to wield it, some foes to cut down to be showy, and naturally a place to have all of that go down. But what about the rest of the fundamentals shown? Ulm could have just made a gif of the weapon transforming, a generic model swinging it around. The Beowulfs could have been sketches or rotating models, and the background could have been a few landscape thumbnails, and he still would have had a perfectly acceptable, if more commercial and bland lookbook to use for his pitch. Those are all things that he would need later to share with other artists and animators for reference anyway. But then, where would the passion be? Red went way harder than it needed to, but that is what made it so effective. Why it went from a proof of concept to a trailer to a video essay talking point 12 years after its release. There is something to be said for Ohm's industry savvy. He knew how to make an impression on the people he was pitching to, and he knew the best way to help sell his idea by leveraging his skills. But even then, the extra details? Summer's Grave, a tailored soundtrack? These are things that speak to Ohm's passion for his world of RWBY, and without them, we might never have gotten the decade-spanning franchise with multiple games, comics, and crossovers that outlived its original production company. The reason I love passion projects that only came together as they did because someone loved their part of making them enough to add those extra details, is because the people making them loved them first. They are proof in this ever more capital-driven world that making things can be about love and finding joy in the creative process. I love Red in particular as a passion project because it serves as proof that you don't have to have all of the answers to what your project will be. You just have to love what you have enough that you want to put in the work, even when things are hard and you're stuck doing the less lovable parts. So that's the video. I love consuming media where you know that the creators were passionate about it, or that at least some of the team were passionate about their role in making their part of the whole. I think it's the attention to detail put in by those people that can make a piece of media linger in the hearts and minds of those who interact with it. So yeah, if you liked the orchestral version of Red Like Roses that was playing throughout this video, you can check out the full, uninterrupted version on ssbbmaster's channel, which is linked down in the description below. If you liked this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you for watching until the end. I'd love to hear some examples of media you've interacted with that maybe wasn't perfect, but that stayed with you because of how they poured on the passion and did one thing really, really well. I hope to see you again next fortnight. Until then, keep practicing hope, and don't be afraid to get punk about it.